In the unforgiving Montana territory of 1875, snow blankets the landscape like a deceptive promise of purity, while wealthy widow Eleanor Blackwood struggles to maintain her hard-won cattle empire against a society that refuses to accept a woman's independence. When her mail-order husband arrives revealing himself as Dr. Jackson Freeman, a black physician from Boston, Eleanor's immediate rejection mirrors the town's deep-seated prejudice, forcing both to confront what true love and acceptance might cost in a world where their union could mean death. Eleanor Blackwood had survived an abusive marriage and built an empire from ashes, but choosing Jackson would require burning everything to the ground again. Blood spilled across pristine snow as Eleanor Blackwood stood over Jackson Freeman's battered body, her shotgun aimed at 3 men from her own town. Behind her, flames engulfed the town's only church, silhouetting her figure against the night sky. "I'll kill the next man who steps forward," she announced, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "This man is my husband." The crowd fell silent. The banker, Augustus Holloway, stepped forward with a cruel smile. "Then you've signed your own death warrant, Eleanor. No white woman marries a black man in Montana territory and lives to tell about it." 6 months earlier, Montana winters carved bone-deep memories. Eleanor Blackwood knew this truth as she watched the season's first snow from her ranch house window. 3 years a widow, the cold reminded her that survival required calculation, not sentiment. The letter sat on her desk. Male handwriting, educated penmanship. Dr. Jackson Freeman of Boston, Massachusetts, had accepted her advertisement. His credentials impressed. Harvard Medical School, surgical experience, publications in respected journals. His daguerreotype showed a handsome man with light features and intelligent eyes. "You need to consider it," Hank, her foreman, said from the doorway. "The Cattlemen's Association won't deal with a woman much longer. You need a man to front this operation." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "I built this ranch from nothing after Walter died." "And you did it magnificently," Hank said. "But inheritance laws favor men. One accident and everything transfers to Walter's worthless brother." Her fingers traced the edges of the letter. "A business arrangement only." "Of course." She penned her acceptance that evening. The Boston doctor would arrive by December's end. The stagecoach appeared through swirling snow the day the blizzard hit. Eleanor waited at the station, her best dress covered by a heavy coat, her expression carefully neutral. When passengers disembarked, she searched for the man from the photograph. A tall figure approached, hat in hand. "Mrs. Blackwood?" Eleanor's greeting died on her lips. The man before her was unmistakably Negro. His skin was lighter than most she'd seen, but there was no mistaking it. "Dr. Freeman," she managed. His smile faltered at her expression. "You seem surprised." The photograph was unclear. Understanding dawned on his face. He stood straighter. "I see." Eleanor glanced around the station. People stared. Augustus Holloway, the town banker, watched from across the street, eyes narrowed. "There's been a misunderstanding," Eleanor said, voice low. "I can offer you money for return passage." "The next eastbound stage doesn't leave until the storm clears," the station master interrupted. "Could be weeks." Eleanor felt heat rise to her face. "I can't possibly—" "I'm sure we can arrange accommodations at the hotel," Jackson said. The station master shook his head. "Hotel's full with the stranded passengers. Nobody's leaving town in this weather." Augustus approached, hat tipped. "Problem, Mrs. Blackwood?" "No problem," Eleanor answered too quickly. "I'm Augustus Holloway, town banker." He extended his hand to Jackson, smile not reaching his eyes. "And you are?" "Dr. Jackson Freeman," Jackson replied, shaking the offered hand. "Doctor? How unusual. And what brings you to our little community?" Eleanor cut in before Jackson could answer. "Dr. Freeman is consulting on some medical matters at the ranch. Temporarily." Augustus's gaze flicked between them. "Interesting company you're keeping, Mrs. Blackwood." That night, Jackson slept in the ranch's guest quarters, separated from the main house. Eleanor paced her bedroom, reputation and practicality warring in her mind. By morning, she'd decided, he would stay only until the roads cleared. 2 days later, Sarah developed the cough. Eleanor's niece had come for winter holidays, her only family since Walter's death. The cough worsened overnight. By morning, the child burned with fever. Eleanor found Jackson in the stables preparing to move to town despite the continuing storm. "My niece is ill," she said without greeting. "I need your medical opinion." Sarah's condition deteriorated rapidly. White patches lined her throat when Jackson examined her. "Diphtheria," he confirmed. "It will spread through town quickly in these conditions. Can you treat it?" Jackson met her gaze directly. "Yes. I'll pay whatever—" "I don't require your acceptance to do what's right, Mrs. Blackwood." Within days, the epidemic engulfed Pierce Creek. The town doctor fell ill. The hotel became an infirmary. Jackson worked tirelessly, moving between town and ranch, treating anyone who needed help. Eleanor converted her dining room into a treatment ward. She worked alongside Jackson, following his instructions, witnessing his skill. When Sarah's fever finally broke, Eleanor felt something crack within her rigid worldview. "Thank you," she whispered when they were alone. Jackson nodded, dark circles under his eyes. "She's strong, like her aunt." Augustus visited daily, ostensibly checking on the welfare of town citizens. His eyes followed Jackson with calculated interest. "Strange how trouble arrived with him, isn't it?" he remarked to Eleanor. "The disease was already here," she corrected. "Dr. Freeman is saving lives." Augustus's smile turned cold. "For now. But I wonder what else he brings with him." Eleanor found the letters while organizing medical supplies in Jackson's quarters. She knew she shouldn't read them, but curiosity overwhelmed propriety. Jackson wrote regularly to his sister in Boston, describing his dream of establishing a practice where skill mattered more than skin color. She confronted him that evening. "I found your letters." Jackson didn't look up from sorting medicines. "Privacy is a luxury I've never been afforded." "Why come west?" "Why answer my advertisement?" His hands stilled. "Because here, no one knew me. I could be judged by my abilities first, before they saw my skin." A bitter smile crossed his features. "That was the theory." "You know about Walter," she said suddenly. "The town gossip. That he drank. That he hit you. That he left you in debt." Jackson finally met her eyes. "That you built everything from nothing after he died." They stood in silence, newfound understanding between them. The epidemic claimed 12 lives before waning. Eleanor collapsed from exhaustion during the worst of it. She woke to find Jackson tending her with the same gentle care he showed all patients. "You don't have to be invincible," he told her. "No one should face everything alone." As conditions improved, Jackson prepared to leave. The storm had cleared. The stage would run again soon. Eleanor told herself she should feel relieved. Instead, she felt hollow. The discovery changed everything. While reviewing loan documents in Augustus's office, Eleanor noticed maps of railroad expansion and lists of property acquisitions throughout the valley. Her land was marked prominently, the only major parcel not yet secured. Augustus entered as she studied the maps. "Curious, aren't you? You've been buying debt from struggling ranchers." "Business, Eleanor. The railroad needs continuous land. Your property is the missing piece." His smile turned predatory. "Marry me, and we'll both profit handsomely." That evening, Eleanor found Jackson packing his medical bag. "Stay," she said, extending her hand. "I have a proposition." Jackson lowered his medical bag. The lamplight caught the angles of his face, revealing more curiosity than suspicion. "Augustus plans to sell the entire valley to the railroad," Eleanor said. "He's been acquiring debt from struggling ranchers. My land is the missing piece." "Why tell me this?" Eleanor smoothed her skirt, buying time. "I propose a partnership, your medical expertise in exchange for my protection while we gather evidence against him." Jackson studied her face. Yesterday you couldn't wait for me to leave. Yesterday, I didn't know Augustus was destroying families for profit. Something unspoken passed between them. The wind rattled the windows, winter's grip still firm despite spring's approach. Jackson extended his hand, an agreement sealed in silence. Eleanor converted the guest house into a medical office. Jackson began treating patients there, mostly ranch hands and their families at first. Word spread about the doctor's skilled hands. Few mentioned his skin. He joined Eleanor's business meetings as her consultant. Men who refused to acknowledge Eleanor directly would speak to Jackson, unaware of her strategy. She watched respect reluctantly form for his intelligence, his precise questions revealing more than any ledger. The ranch hands divided quickly. Some remembered Jackson's work during the epidemic. Others resented his presence, refused treatment, spoke in whispers when he passed. "They'll come around," Hank assured Eleanor one evening. "Most are good men. Just need time." Time revealed more than tolerance. As snow melted, Eleanor and Jackson began visiting neighboring properties. The official reason, introducing her new ranch doctor. The truth, gathering evidence of Augustus's predatory lending. They documented everything. Interest rates changed on signed agreements. Foreclosure notices for minor infractions. Property boundaries mysteriously shifted on county records. "He's built a house of cards," Jackson said, studying their notes one night. "One strong wind would collapse it." Eleanor nodded, aware of how close they sat, papers spread between them on her dining table. Sarah had returned to her parents. The house felt different now, quieter, more intimate. "The railroad commissioner visits next month," she said. "If we present evidence, then we'd need proof of documentation tampering." Their eyes met over the papers. Possibility hung between them like smoke. That night, lightning cracked the spring sky. A late snow squall swept across the valley. Eleanor woke to find Jackson in her kitchen, boiling coffee. "Couldn't sleep," he explained. "Mind keeps working." They sat at her table, mugs warming their hands. Outside, wind bent the trees in supplication. "Why did Walter hit you?" Jackson asked suddenly. Eleanor's fingers tightened around her mug. "Because I couldn't bear children. Because the ranch was failing. Because whiskey made him mean." She looked up. "Why did you really answer my advertisement?" "Because I was tired of being seen as a novelty. Harvard's token Negro doctor." His smile held no humor. "I thought distance might grant dignity." Morning found them asleep at the table, hands inches apart across scattered papers. When Eleanor woke, she found Jackson watching her, something unreadable in his eyes. Spring brought green to the valley. Together they rode to the county seat, searching property records. Augustus's name appeared throughout, acquiring land in a clear pattern. The railroad's planned route became obvious. "He's promised them continuous access," Eleanor said on the ride home. "Every property he's acquired forms an unbroken line. Except yours." Eleanor watched the horizon, where her land stretched beyond sight. "He's been courting me for a year. Thought I'd be grateful for male attention." That afternoon, they discovered Augustus's forgery. Records showed Eleanor's signature on an agreement she'd never seen, pledging her land as collateral for a loan never given. "He's desperate," Jackson said. "This is criminal." Their triumph carried them home on wings of justice. In her kitchen, Eleanor laughed for what felt like the first time in years. Jackson's smile transformed his serious face. The moment suspended between them, fragile as spun glass. Neither could say who moved first. One moment they stood separated by propriety. The next, his lips found hers. Software questioning. When they broke apart, fear replaced joy in both their eyes. "I shouldn't have," Jackson said. Eleanor touched her lips, voice a whisper. "Neither should I." Sunday arrived with clear skies and heavy hearts. Eleanor attended church services for appearance's sake. Jackson's absence beside her both relief and regret. Pastor Williams preached fire and brimstone. Unnatural relations bring God's judgment. Those who transgress natural boundaries invite damnation. Eleanor felt eyes upon her. Stories had spread. Whispers followed her movements. Augustus stood during announcements, dressed in his finest suit. "Friends, I have an announcement. Our dear widow Blackwood has faced challenges managing her property alone. Today, I formally announce my intention to marry Eleanor and save her from potential ruin." The congregation murmured approval. Eleanor's hands went white-knuckled in her lap. "I must decline," she said, rising to her feet. "My ranch prospers under my management." Augustus's smile thinned. "Perhaps you prefer other arrangements? Perhaps your Negro doctor provides counsel beyond medical matters." Silence filled the church. Eleanor's chin lifted. "Dr. Freeman is a respected physician who saved many lives here, including my niece's." "Indeed," Augustus said. "And soon you'll have reason to appreciate my generosity. The Railroad Commission has confirmed their plans. Without Eleanor's land, the railroad will bypass Pierce Creek entirely. Our town will wither while neighboring communities prosper." Eyes that moments before held judgment now filled with fear. Livelihoods hung in balance. Property values, futures, all dependent on Eleanor's compliance. She left services without speaking further. Augustus followed her outside. "Consider carefully, Eleanor. The town needs this railroad. Your stubbornness will destroy families. Your greed already has." His voice dropped low. "Careful. People behave unpredictably when desperate, especially regarding women who keep company with Negroes." The threat lingered in spring air, sweet with wildflowers. That night, Eleanor found her fence lines cut, cattle scattered across neighboring properties. 2 prized bulls lay slaughtered near the creek, valuable meat left to rot. A warning. Jackson examined the damage alongside her, face grim. "This will escalate. You should send me away, for your safety." "I've spent my life cowering from one man or another," Eleanor said. "No more." They rode home in silence. Jackson's shoulders carried visible weight. At the stables, he helped her dismount, hands lingering at her waist a moment too long. "I've put you in danger," he said. "I put myself here." That night, Eleanor made her decision. She found Jackson in his quarters, packing. "Don't," she said from the doorway. "I won't be the cause of your ruin." Eleanor stepped closer. "I propose marriage." Jackson's hands stilled. "What?" "A marriage of convenience. Property rights would transfer to you as my husband. Augustus couldn't force my land sale." "Do you hear yourself?" Jackson turned to her, eyes pained. "You would bind yourself legally to a man you flinched from touching days ago." "That's not fair, isn't it? I won't be used as a shield by a woman who still sees my skin before my person." Eleanor's words died in her throat. His assessment cut deep because it held truth. She'd changed, yes. But enough? 3 days passed without communication between them. Eleanor focused on repairing fences, finding scattered cattle. Jackson treated patients in town, staying overnight at the livery rather than returning to the ranch. When word came, it arrived with one of Eleanor's ranch hands, riding hard from town. "They've got him," the man panted. "Holloway and his men took the doctor while he was gathering supplies. They're holding him at the church." Eleanor's blood turned to ice. For what purpose? Talk of a trial. But there's no law in what they're planning. Eleanor moved without hesitation. She retrieved her shotgun, loaded both barrels, and mounted her fastest horse. "You riding into that alone is suicide," her foreman warned. Eleanor's eyes held steel. "Then I'll die on my terms." Eleanor galloped toward town, shotgun across her lap. Twilight stretched shadows across the road like grasping hands. Each hoofbeat echoed her heartbeat. Each mile revealed more of her truth. She'd sent Jackson away to protect her reputation. Now she rode to risk her life for him. Pierce Creek appeared on the horizon, church steeple silhouetted against the darkening sky. People gathered in the street, drawn by shouting from the white clapboard building. Augustus's voice carried above the others, commanding as a preacher's. Eleanor dismounted at the edge of town. She approached on foot, shotgun held low. The church doors stood open. Inside, men had arranged pews in a circle. Jackson stood in the center, hands bound, face bloody but unbowed. "This man," Augustus proclaimed, "has corrupted our community, bewitched its most vulnerable widow." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eleanor recognized faces, men who'd shared her table, women who'd worked beside her during the epidemic. "What law has he broken?" she called from the doorway. Heads turned. The crowd parted. Augustus smiled like a wolf discovering injured prey. "Ah, Mrs. Blackwood, how good of you to join us." "Release him." Augustus circled Jackson like a vulture. "He's exposed himself as a man with ambitions beyond his station. Documents found in his possession prove he intended to acquire your property through manipulation." "Liar," Jackson said, voice steady despite his bruised face. "We have your letters," Augustus countered. "Your plans to establish yourself here, your ambitions regarding Mrs. Blackwood's assets." Eleanor stepped forward. "The only one plotting to steal my land is you, Augustus." She produced the forged documents from her pocket. The banker's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "We found your forgeries, your plans to sell the entire valley to the railroad." "Ridiculous," Augustus scoffed. "I've done nothing but try to bring prosperity to Pierce Creek." "By destroying its people first?" Eleanor turned to the crowd. "He's acquired debts from half the properties in the valley, changed interest rates, altered boundaries." Doubt flickered across several faces. "Not enough." "Even if true," Pastor Williams interjected, "it doesn't excuse the unnatural association between you and this Negro. A decent woman would never—" "A decent woman would recognize truth when faced with it," Eleanor cut in. "Dr. Freeman saved your child's life during the epidemic. Saved many of your lives." The pastor's eyes dropped. Others shifted uncomfortably. Augustus moved toward Eleanor, voice lowered to reach only her ears. "If you leave now, your reputation might survive. Stay, and you'll lose everything." Eleanor raised her voice. "Dr. Freeman came here because I advertised for a husband. The arrangement wasn't what either of us expected, but he's shown more honor than any man in this room." Jackson's eyes held hers across the church. Something unspoken passed between them. Understanding. Forgiveness. Augustus's patience snapped like dry kindling. "Enough of this farce. If the widow insists on defending her Negro lover, she condemns herself." He gestured to his men. "The evidence is clear. Both have conspired against this town's future." Two men moved toward Eleanor, her shotgun raised. "Step back." "She threatens good Christian men," Augustus announced. "Her mind is clearly addled. Restrain her for her own protection." Eleanor fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Wood splintered. Women screamed. In the confusion, she moved to Jackson's side, using her knife to cut his bonds. "This has gone far enough," she said to the assembled crowd. "Any man who moves against us will answer to this." She leveled the shotgun. Augustus's face contorted. For a moment, Eleanor glimpsed the man beneath the respectable banker's mask. Rage, desperation, fear of losing control. He reached beneath his coat and produced a match. Without warning, he struck it against the wall and tossed it toward the altar. Dry spring had left the wooden church vulnerable. Flames caught the altar cloth, spread to curtains. Smoke billowed. "Now we'll see God's judgment," Augustus declared, backing toward the door. "Those who survive belong in Pierce Creek. Those who burn do not." Panic erupted. People pushed toward the doors. Eleanor grabbed Jackson's arm, pulling him toward a side exit. Outside they ran, choking on smoke, eyes watering. Behind them, the church burned like a funeral pyre. They hadn't made it 20 yards when Augustus's men intercepted them. 3 miners with clubs and hatred in their eyes. The first swing caught Jackson's shoulder. He stumbled, fell to one knee in the snow. Eleanor raised her shotgun, drew a bead on the lead attacker. Her voice emerged calm despite her racing heart. "I'll kill the next man who steps forward. This man is my husband." Blood spilled across pristine snow as Jackson struggled to rise, his wounds leaving crimson trails on white ground. Behind them, flames engulfed the town's only church, silhouetting Eleanor's figure against the night sky. The crowd that had escaped the fire gathered at a distance. Augustus pushed to the front, his cruel smile visible in the firelight. "Then you've signed your own death warrant, Eleanor. No white woman marries a black man in Montana territory and lives to tell about it." Eleanor's finger tightened on the trigger. "Try me." The standoff stretched. In the distance, a bell rang the fire alarm. Men would come with water buckets soon. Time was short. Augustus sensed it too. He gestured to his men. "Take them." Eleanor fired. The shot went wide intentionally, kicking up snow near the men's feet. They hesitated. Just long enough. She helped Jackson to his feet. Together, they backed away from the crowd, toward where she'd left her horse. "This isn't over, Eleanor," Augustus called after them. "You've chosen your side." They rode double through the darkness, Jackson's arms around Eleanor's waist, his breath warm against her neck. Behind them, orange flames painted the night sky. The church bell stopped ringing, its tower collapsed. When they crested the hill overlooking Eleanor's ranch, fresh horror awaited. Flames rose from her barn, her house, everything she'd built since Walter's death, devoured by fire. "Augustus works quickly," Jackson said, voice hollow with exhaustion. They approached cautiously. No attackers remained, just destruction, complete, methodical. Her ranch hands had either fled or been driven off, her cattle scattered or stolen. They dismounted near the smoking ruins of her house. Heat still radiated from the blackened timbers. Eleanor's shoulders stayed straight, her eyes dry. She'd rebuilt once. She could again. "I'm sorry," Jackson said. Eleanor turned to him. "For what?" "For bringing this upon you. I brought it on myself when I challenged Augustus." She touched his bruised face gently. "We both did." They made camp in the stable, the only structure left standing. Jackson tended his wounds with supplies from his medical bag, which had survived in the saddlebags. Eleanor built a small fire, brewed coffee from her emergency supplies. Morning brought clarity and visitors. The carriage appeared on the horizon just after dawn. Eleanor watched its approach, shotgun ready. Jackson stood beside her, medical bag in hand instead of a weapon. The carriage stopped 50 yards away. A woman emerged. Well-dressed, city clothes, dark hair beneath a fashionable hat. She walked toward them with purpose, apparently unconcerned by the shotgun. "Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood?" she called. Eleanor didn't lower her weapon. "Who's asking?" "My name is Violet Holloway." The woman stopped at a respectful distance. "Augustus Holloway is my husband." Eleanor and Jackson exchanged glances. The woman noticed. "Yes, my husband. Of 15 years. Her smile held no humor. "I see his proposal to you was as sincere as his other dealings." "What do you want?" Eleanor asked. "To inform you that Augustus has been playing this game across 3 territories." She opened her handbag, removed several papers. "He's acquired land through similar schemes in Colorado and Wyoming, always preceding railroad expansion." Eleanor took the papers, property deeds, marriage certificates, arrest warrants. "The authorities are searching for him now," Violet continued. "His forgeries were discovered in Cheyenne. When I learned he was operating here, I came immediately." "Why?" Jackson asked, speaking for the first time. Violet's eyes measured him, noting his injuries without comment. "Because every scheme he executes leaves ruined lives behind, and because I intend to divorce him and claim my share of his assets before he disappears again." She turned back to Eleanor. "The Railroad Commission knows of his fraud. They'll deal with him accordingly when he's found." With that, Violet Holloway returned to her carriage, dignity wrapped around her like armor. The driver turned the horses, heading back toward town. Eleanor and Jackson stood in silence, watching dust rise from the carriage wheels. Around them, smoke still rose from the ruins of everything Eleanor had built. "What now?" Jackson asked quietly. Eleanor surveyed the destruction. "We rebuild." "We?" She turned to him, really seeing him for the first time. Not his skin, not his usefulness. Him, a man who'd endured hatred with dignity, who'd healed when others sought to destroy. "If you'll stay." Dawn spread across the Montana sky, painting the charred remains of Eleanor's ranch in unforgiving light. Jackson stood beside her, their shoulders nearly touching, surveying what remained of her life's work. In the barn's shadow, Eleanor's horse nickered softly, the only sound in the devastating stillness. "We have nothing to rebuild with," Jackson said quietly. Eleanor's eyes scanned the horizon. "We have land. The most valuable asset remains." Smoke still curled from the blackened timber. The smell of ash hung heavy, a reminder of how quickly foundations can crumble, how easily certainties burn. They slept in the stable that night, on hay made into rough pallets. Eleanor woke to find Jackson already tending the small fire, coffee brewing in the rescued pot. His medical training showed in his efficiency, his caution in his vigilance. "We should leave," he said when he noticed her watching. "Start somewhere new." Eleanor sat up, hay clinging to her dress. "This is my home. It's ashes now." Her chin lifted, the familiar gesture of defiance that had carried her through widowhood, through debt, through rebuilding once already. Ashes make good fertilizer. By midday, visitors arrived, not attackers, but allies. Hank, her foreman, returned with 3 ranch hands. They'd fled during the attack, regrouped in the hills. Their eyes held shame at their retreat, determination in their return. "We're here to help rebuild," Hank said simply. Eleanor nodded once, the closest she could come to forgiveness. They began clearing debris immediately, salvaging what little remained unburned. The next morning brought another unexpected visitor. Pastor Williams arrived alone, on foot, hat in hand. His eyes couldn't meet Eleanor's directly. "Augustus has been arrested," he said without greeting, "for arson and fraud. The authorities came from Cheyenne." Eleanor's face revealed nothing. "Why are you here, Pastor?" "My child would have died without Dr. Freeman's care during the epidemic." His knuckles whitened around his hat brim. "I've been thinking about redemption." He looked at Jackson then, finally. "I'll not interfere with whatever arrangement you two determine, and I'll speak against those who might." After he left, Eleanor found Jackson organizing medical supplies in the stable. "What arrangement would you determine?" she asked. Jackson's hand stilled. "What do you mean?" "The pastor expects us to marry." "For convenience." "Is that all it would be?" The question hung between them, fragile as spider silk. Jackson set down the bottle he'd been holding. "It would be dangerous," he said finally, "for both of us." Eleanor stepped closer. "I no longer fear danger, only regret." They married 3 days later. No church remained for the ceremony, so they held it on the ashes of Eleanor's ranch house. Pastor Williams officiated, visibly uncomfortable but resolute. Hank and the returning ranch hands stood witness. A handful of townsfolk attended, mostly those whose lives Jackson had saved during the epidemic. They stood separate from the others, their presence both apology and defiance. Eleanor wore her plainest dress, unadorned except for a wild rose tucked into her collar. Jackson wore his city suit, incongruous among the ashes but dignified. When they kissed to seal their vows, the small assembly remained silent. No cheers, no objections, just the wind across the prairie, carrying away the scent of smoke. They began rebuilding immediately. First a cabin, single-roomed but sturdy. Eleanor worked alongside the men, driving nails, sawing lumber. Jackson divided his time between construction and continuing his medical practice, which now operated from a lean-to beside their growing cabin. News traveled across the territory. A white woman had married a Negro doctor. Some came to gawk, others to threaten, most simply to see if the rumors were true. Through summer heat, they rebuilt. Fences rose from broken posts. Corrals took shape from salvaged timber. Eleanor tracked down scattered cattle, purchased new stock at deflated prices from neighbors who could no longer maintain their herds after Augustus's schemes collapsed. Jackson's practice grew despite prejudice. His skill proved more valuable than conformity. Women brought sick children in secret at first, then openly as results spoke louder than social convention. By autumn, walls surrounded them again. A proper bedroom, a kitchen, a small examination room for Jackson's patients. Not the grand house Eleanor had built after Walter's death, but something new, something shared. The letter arrived with the first snow, official railroad letterhead. Eleanor read it twice before handing it to Jackson. "They're offering to purchase a right-of-way through our property," she explained. "The legitimate railroad commission, not Augustus's scheme." Jackson studied the offer. "This is a substantial sum." "Enough to start fresh anywhere," Eleanor agreed. "Boston, Chicago, San Francisco." "You'd leave?" Eleanor looked around their small home, the ranch taking shape again beyond the windows, the life they'd begun building together despite everything. "Would you want to?" Jackson set the letter aside. "I came west seeking something I couldn't name. I thought it was professional respect." "And now?" "Now I think perhaps it was you." Their second winter together brought harsh storms but held none of the previous year's desperation. Their cabin stood warm against prairie winds. Jackson's medical practice flourished, patients coming from 3 counties for his care. Eleanor's herd grew, her business acumen undiminished by marriage. "It's nothing like I imagined," she told him one night, watching as he removed his boots by the fire. "What isn't?" "Marriage, the second time." Jackson smiled, the expression transforming his scholarly face. "Better or worse?" "Different." Eleanor's hand reached for his across the small space between their chairs. "Real." Spring arrived early. Green pushed through black earth where fire had purged the previous year's growth. New life from destruction's remnants. The metaphor wasn't lost on either of them. On the anniversary of their first meeting, they stood on the hilltop overlooking their property. Below, the railroad construction advanced along the edge of their land. The agreement had been signed, the money paid. Enough to secure their future while preserving what mattered most. "Is it what you imagined?" Jackson asked, watching the first train rumble through the valley. Metal wheels on new-laid track, progress cutting through wilderness. Eleanor smiled. "It's better." She turned toward him, hand extended, ready to walk back to the home they'd built together on scorched earth, ready for whatever came next in this unexpected life they'd forged. The crack split the air like thunder from a clear sky. Jackson stumbled forward. Confusion crossed his face first, then pain. Eleanor caught him as he fell, his weight driving them both to the ground. Blood blossomed across his shirt, bright against white cotton, final as a period at the end of a sentence. In the distance, a lone figure on horseback galloped away. Augustus Holloway, escaped from custody, had claimed his revenge. Eleanor cradled Jackson in her arms, pressing desperate hands against the wound. His blood seeped between her fingers, warm, relentless. "Stay with me," she commanded, voice breaking for the first time since they'd met. Jackson's eyes found hers, clear despite the pain, present despite the approaching darkness. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered, his hand covering hers over the wound. "We rebuild, remember?" Eleanor pressed harder against the bleeding, summoned the strength that had carried her through loss before. This time would be different. This time she refused to be left alone. "Hank," she called toward the ranch below, voice carrying on the spring air. "Bring the wagon. Bring bandages." The minutes stretched eternal. Jackson's breathing grew shallow. His skin paled beneath its warm brown. Eleanor held him, rocked him gently, refused to acknowledge the possibility of loss. The wagon rattled up the hill. Hands reached to help. Gentle despite their calluses, they lifted Jackson onto the wagon bed. Eleanor climbed in beside him, maintaining pressure on the wound. Her dress soaked with his blood, her face set in determination. "To town," she ordered, "fast as the horses will run." 3 days Jackson lay between worlds. Eleanor never left his side. She changed bandages, fed him broth, whispered promises only he could hear. On the 4th morning, his fever broke. His eyes opened, found hers. "You're still here," he murmured. Eleanor took his hand, kissed the palm that had healed so many, now healing itself. "Always." They captured Augustus 2 counties over. Justice claimed him properly this time. His hatred had accomplished nothing but its own defeat. The railroad continued its advance across the territory. Pierce Creek grew around the new station. Prosperity followed iron tracks across the prairie. 1 year later, Eleanor and Jackson stood again on the hilltop where he'd fallen. The scar on his chest had healed pink and proud beneath his shirt. Eleanor's hand rested in his, her other hand curved protectively around her growing belly. Evidence of life continuing, of love triumphing over hatred. Below them, their ranch spread in all directions. Cattle grazed on green spring grass. A new house stood where fire had claimed the old, larger, stronger. The south wing housed Jackson's thriving medical practice. The north wing awaited their child. "Is it what you imagined?" Jackson asked, echoing his question from a year before. Eleanor watched the train rumble through the valley below, metal wheels on new-laid track, progress cutting through wilderness. Her land, their future. "No," she smiled, "it's better.